My parents decided the best way to deal with their unemployed golden child was to plant him in my apartment without even running it by me. And since I was already renting their unit with no lease, they figured why not double the rent too? Apparently, I was now funding his lifestyle by default. When I pushed back, they shrugged and said, "That's your choice." Fine. My choice was to take every single thing I'd bought and leave the place looking like a display model after clearance day. But to understand why that mattered, you need to know what the apartment started as. Meet my apartment, aka The Trap. When I first stepped into that apartment my parents owned, it looked like four walls and punishment disguised as opportunity. No lease, no paperwork, just pay us rent and you can stay here. It sounded simple, but simplicity has a way of flipping into a trap. The place wasn't just unfurnished, it was hollow. No curtains, no chair, not even a forgotten lamp. It felt less like moving into a home and more like setting up camp inside a concrete shoebox. And yet, at 22, I started paying them rent every month. From that point on, everything inside those walls was going to come from me, or there wasn't going to be anything at all. That first night was spent with a blanket on the floor, staring at the ceiling and thinking this was rock bottom for comfort. Slowly, though, I chipped away at the emptiness. Piece by piece, with the money I earned from working full-time, I started stocking the place. A mattress on a basic frame, the kind that doesn't look like luxury, but still felt like progress. Later, a couch that held up under everyday use, not much to look at, but solid enough to show I live like an adult with furniture, rather than a student with beanbags. I saved again and bought a small dining table with 4 chairs, even though my guest list never reached 4. Shelves, a desk, kitchen basics like pans, knives, spatulas, all of them earned one paycheck at a time. I even upgraded to a TV, not massive, but clear enough to watch a film without feeling like I was squinting into a phone. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and that's what gave the space away. Each piece stood as a symbol that I wasn't leaning on handouts. I bought what I needed, sometimes what I wanted, and stacked the room with evidence that I was standing on my own. I knew the price of every spoon, every mug, because it came at the cost of skipped luxuries elsewhere. Nothing had been gifted, nothing handed down. No one else had taken part in transforming that echo chamber into an actual home. The longer I lived there, the more pride I attached to those purchases. I didn't care if it looked modest compared with impressive apartments full of designer furniture. For me, it meant progress. After long shifts, collapsing into a bed I paid for didn't feel like just rest. It felt like proof. Eating out of a bowl in my kitchen didn't feel mundane. It was a reminder that I'd bought each part of that meal setting with money I had earned. My parents, on the other hand, kept their role strictly transactional. They wanted the rent on time, but there was never an offer to lend a hand furnishing or repairing anything. A leaky faucet? My problem. Broken light? Mine. Even as they collected the money, they treated the apartment as just another unit they happened to own, detached completely from the fact that I was building something inside of it. That gap in perspective mattered. To my parents, it was extra square footage they controlled. To me, it became the stage where I proved to myself that I could handle independence. I wasn't waiting around for their scraps. I actually worked, managed, and planned. The living area became a collection of proof that I was the opposite of helpless. Still, inside the family, the apartment never earned recognition as mine. They dismissed it almost casually. If they noticed me bringing in something like an office chair to replace the floor-sitting setup I've been using, the comment would be flat, like, "Oh, you got a chair." No acknowledgement, no respect for the effort behind it. Looking back, I think that dismissal planted a problem I didn't see forming. I viewed the apartment as something personal because I had filled its emptiness myself, but they continued to see it as just theirs, a space they owned, no matter who was paying to make it livable. That difference in how we saw the same 4 walls was critical. I thought I had carved out a little independence, but to them it remained a flexible property they could rearrange whenever it was convenient. And that's the piece I missed at the time. Because while I was proud of owning every light bulb, every plate, every cushion, none of it shifted the way my family viewed the apartment. They weren't concerned with how much of myself I had already poured into the place. When they decided to shuffle pieces around on their side of the chessboard, they treated the apartment as something they could reassign, like I'd only ever been a placeholder tenant. So when they finally acted on that perspective, I didn't see it coming. The golden child enters stage left. Here's where the family production really took its turn. Enter my brother, mid-20s, unemployed for years, and forever described by my parents as being in a rough patch. That phrase became the family's magic wand, waved every time reality pointed out he hadn't worked a single steady job since finishing school. According to them, his downtime was temporary. According to a calendar, his downtime had already lasted longer than a college degree. The funny part is, he doesn't look miserable. He's not pacing the floor stressed about interviews or waking up early to hand out resumes. He's stretched across a couch, controller in hand, running marathon gaming sessions that he calls stress relief. I used to stop by my parents' place for dinner before he moved in with me. Without fail, there he'd be, sweatpants, headphones, a pile of wrappers within arm's reach. When I hinted that maybe he should spend 10 minutes filling out a job application, my parents would leap to his defense. They'd paint the picture of an overburdened soul who just needed time. He's been under a lot of pressure, they'd say, as if pressure meant choosing between switching the console off or starting another round. In their eyes, he wasn't avoiding responsibility. He was enduring some noble struggle. They compared him to an artist misunderstood by the times. If society just recognized his value, he'd succeed. Never mind the fact that his craft was consuming Wi-Fi bandwidth and frozen food. For years, his naps were reframed as recharging, his skipped chores as conserving energy, his lack of progress as waiting for the right fit. Evidently, the right fit doesn't exist anywhere in our city because it's been missing in action for nearly a decade. And then came the decision that flipped his lifestyle directly onto me. My parents, tired of crumbs on their counters, concluded that a better way to support him would be to send him into my apartment. Their wording wasn't up for discussion. They didn't ask if I was open to it. They told me he'd be moving in for a while, which in family speak translates to until further notice. Apparently, the logic was simple. I already had a place, I was already paying, and therefore I could carry both of us. That logic stripped me of choice at the very start. There was no negotiation, no trade-off, no recognition of the weight it would add to my life. Just a declaration disguised as family duty. And when I objected, the retort was immediate: family helps family. Except that phrase is never balanced in practice. I've been paying my parents' rent each month since I turned 22 without issue. My brother's contribution? 0. In our family math, my hard work equals responsibility while his inertia equals sympathy. Watching how differently we were treated was like holding up 2 receipts and realizing one is filled with line items and charges while the other is completely blank. I built stability for myself, paid them regularly, furnished an entire apartment piece by piece. He coasted year after year, rent-free, sheltered by parents who bailed him out at every missed term. Yet somehow, I was assigned as the one offering him a helping hand, even when that help came at my own expense. What made it almost darkly funny was how the story was framed. My parents pitched the whole arrangement as if I was gaining a companion, reducing the stress on the family as a whole. To them, it was balance. 2 siblings under one roof, problem solved. From my side, it was more like a roommate who only knew how to consume space, food, and electricity without even pretending to pull his weight. The only bill he managed to rack up was in empty pizza boxes. Think about it in straight numbers. Rent stayed the same. Utilities stayed the same. Every grocery bag was still mine to drag home. The only new variable was another adult living there, one who satisfied none of the responsibilities but doubled nearly all of the costs. What my parents described as helping him translated in real life to me covering an entire second lifestyle. My parents thought they'd shifted the equation in a fair direction. In reality, they just blurred the lines of fairness until I was the one footing both halves. And this wasn't subtle favoritism anymore, it was choreographed. They excused his lack of work as a misfortune beyond his control while treating my financial stability as limitless. If I voiced concerns, the answer came with a mix of dismissal and guilt tripping. He needs support, you can provide it. End of discussion. His failure to contribute didn't register as a problem. My resistance to bankroll him did. From that moment, I became his sponsor by default. No contract, no acknowledgement, just an unspoken assignment. The tone in our household shifted. What used to be seen as parental assistance was now masked as sibling responsibility. The solution wasn't to hold him accountable. It was to keep him comfortable and pass the inconvenience to me. The sharpest part is how they justified it. They insisted this was only temporary, but I'd seen enough family temporaries expand before. My brother's unfinished chapters never came with end dates, only reruns. His rough patch had been scripted long before, and my apartment became the new stage for it. So when he arrived, lounging immediately like the living room had been waiting for him, the tone was set. The second bedroom that I'd set up as a guest space transformed overnight into his private den. His contribution was invisible. My parents acted like this arrangement finally put both kids on equal ground, but I was the only one still paying to stand there. There's a certain irony in all of it. The parents who insisted he needed structure decided not to give him any. They just handed him a softer landing. And the person who had already built their own structure, me, ended up shouldering the fallout. It was as if the furniture, food, and monthly bills weren't proof enough that I had my life in order. Instead, they became evidence that I could handle even more. The sitcom plot practically wrote itself. I was funding the production, furnishing the set, and carrying the co-star who added chaos without adding comedy. And somehow, my parents were satisfied with the script, convinced this was balance, fairness, or maybe even discipline. But living it out daily was different. Once he settled in, the ease with which he slipped into old habits told me exactly what the next chapter was going to look like. Daily life with Captain Couch. Daily life with Captain Couch set a new standard for imbalance I hadn't thought possible. While I woke up at 6, battled through office hours, and carried groceries home, his daily commitment was staking a claim on the couch and rarely budging from it. Unemployed or not, he treated it like the control center for his existence. Blankets piled on one side, controllers on the other, and wrappers scattered everywhere in between. It became his throne, his refueling station, and apparently his bed. His move-in was laughably minimal. He arrived with one basket of wrinkled clothes, a beat-up backpack, and absolutely no household contribution. Not a chair, not a lamp, not even a pillow. He looked around, nodded at the couch I'd worked 2 paychecks for, and acted like it had been waiting all this time just to serve him. That was his entire move-in process. No setup, no effort, just instant annexation of my living room. Day after day, I'd come back from work to find the evidence of his hardship lifestyle spread across every surface. The dishes would still be in the sink, most of them mine, but used by him, and the counters littered with crumbs and cans. His laundry formed its own mountain on the bedroom floor. If I asked for help, even something as small as take out the trash, it was met with theatrical resistance. The smallest task became a lecture on how I didn't understand what he was going through. Once, I told him he had to clean up after demolishing half the kitchen in one sitting, and instead of lifting a sponge, he called our mom. 10 minutes later, I was getting a text from her saying I should cut him some slack. Slack? I was drowning in chores that weren't even mine. Groceries were the most predictable disaster. I'd spend time and money stocking the fridge, sometimes planning meals out for a week. But no matter how carefully I budgeted, the food would vanish within 48 hours. Frozen pizzas, cereal, anything snackable, it was all gone before I had a chance to eat once. More infuriating was his defense. He claimed he ate so much because comfort food helped him through this rough time. Apparently, my working hours and bills weren't worthy of comfort, just his never-ending rest period. Then there were the nights. While I tried to claw back a few hours of sleep before the next workday, my apartment echoed with gunfire from his games or laugh tracks from endless reruns. Midnight would roll around and the volume never dipped, no matter how many times I asked. He looked at me like I was unreasonably fragile for not appreciating his need to relax. Relax? What exactly was he recovering from? Sitting too hard? Bathrooms weren't spared either. Towels sprawled across floors, empty bottles balanced on the tub, and streaks of beard trimmings left like a breadcrumb trail in the sink. If I stocked toilet paper, it vanished without being replaced. Same excuse every time. I forgot. Funny, he never forgot to cue the next episode in his sitcom marathons. The role assignments in our apartment were clear. I was the provider, cleaner, cook, and errand runner. His role was consuming, lounging, and defending his position as the couch contender of the year. The sheer audacity of how comfortable he became was jarring. For him, this wasn't freeloading, it was just life operating at its natural pace. There was no embarrassment, no guilt, only entitlement. At first, I kept thinking the situation was ridiculous enough to laugh at. But the humor wore down fast. Every wrapper I picked up, every load of dishes I washed, and every late-night video game rant coming through the wall chipped away at patience I didn't have to spare. And the worst part? He painted himself as the victim whenever anyone questioned him. Living with Captain Couch started to twist into a lesson about unspoken family rules. He could eat my food and bury the place in mess, and if I resisted, somehow I was the one out of line. The parents who'd placed him in my space didn't see the imbalance because whenever tension boiled over, they chose his comfort over my complaints. By that point, my resentment wasn't even rooted in the chores. It was the normalization of unfairness. I worked, paid, cooked, and maintained. He consumed, blamed, avoided, and called in parental reinforcement when pressed. It was one-sided on every front. And when no one else even acknowledged that fact, it became clear I was the only one carrying the weight of our so-called arrangement. That was the daily cycle, one of us working to move forward, the other glued to the couch while being shielded from accountability. And as uneven as it felt, no one in the family seemed surprised or bothered, except me. It was misery wrapped in repetition. The days piled on and the imbalance didn't shrink, it cemented. And then, out of nowhere, my dad decided to raise the stakes, because apparently constant freeloading wasn't enough on its own. So when the phone rang, and he mentioned changing the rent, it felt like the finale I'd been bracing for. The parents proposed a comedy scam. It started with what my parents called a chat about the apartment, a word that should have signaled something casual, but their expressions made it clear this wasn't small talk. They sat me down and delivered the news with a kind of practiced calm, almost as if they'd rehearsed it. The message was simple. Since there were now 2 adults living in the apartment, the rent was going to be adjusted. And by adjusted, they meant doubled, starting next month. The reasoning they offered was just as blunt. My dad said, someone has to pay, and your brother's in no position right now. That was their logic, boiled down into one sentence. My brother had moved in. He wasn't paying. And instead of pressing him to contribute, their solution was to double my rent and make me responsible for carrying both of us. I sat there stunned, less by the increase itself than by how confidently they framed it as fair. According to them, 2 adults in one apartment meant more value being used, which meant more money owed. But only I was the one meant to shoulder it. In any ordinary setup, rent would be split or at least adjusted so both parties contributed. Here, my parents treated the entire situation like it was obvious. I was working, he was not, and therefore I should cover his share without complaint. The kicker was financial practicality. Up until then, the rent I paid was slightly under the market rate for similar units in the area, which made sense because it was a family arrangement and the place had started completely bare. But doubling it didn't just balance things out, it shoved the price above market value. In other words, I'd be paying more than strangers paid for better equipped apartments, all while funding a sibling who added nothing but noise, crumbs, and demands for Wi-Fi speed. The delivery itself almost felt like a parody of a business pitch. They leaned into words like fair and reasonable as though repetition would make it true. It reminded me of getting signed up for a premium subscription I hadn't asked for, except instead of new features and benefits, the upgraded plan came with extra dishes, missing groceries, and a permanent dent in the couch cushions from my brother's naps. They made it sound like I was lucky to be chosen for this role, when, in reality, it was just another drain. What struck me most wasn't only the demand, but the assumption I'd accept it. They didn't phrase it as a request. There was no sense of negotiation or even acknowledgement that they were asking me to take on something unreasonable. The tone suggested this was already decided, that all I had to do was nod and continue funding the new version of the apartment life, now with bonus freeloader included. That level of entitlement, wrapped in calm certainty, made me question for a split second whether I was the one being unreasonable by even pushing back. But I knew better. I replayed the situation in my head like simple math. I was already paying every bill on time. I was already covering food for 2 people. And now, instead of splitting, my parents wanted me to double my rent so their youngest child didn't have to grow up. The absurdity wasn't hidden. It was right on the surface. Their version of fairness meant turning me into a safety net on both ends, financially and logistically, with no regard for how unbalanced it was in practice. Hearing them lay it out so plainly was almost comical. It was like watching someone explain a pyramid scheme, but insisting it was community support. They positioned themselves at the top, congratulating themselves for solving a problem, while in reality, the entire structure balanced on me paying double. My brother occupied the middle without effort, collecting free room and board as if he'd earned it. And me? I was the base, working harder, draining more, but somehow expected to believe this was an upgrade for everyone involved. If you strip away the absurd framing, the situation was straightforward. My parents had chosen to protect one son's comfort by doubling down on the other's responsibility. They could have asked him to step up, or at least contribute something symbolic to show effort. Instead, they shielded him completely and pressed me to carry the burden alone. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was favoritism disguised as moral logic. The more they talked, the more obvious the disconnect became. They described this arrangement like it was balanced, like both children were being treated fairly. But balance doesn't mean taking everything from one and giving everything to the other. Balance means both sides carry weight. What they were proposing wasn't equalization, it was exploitation dressed up as duty. By the time they finished, I wasn't shocked so much as resigned. Their priorities had been clear for years, but hearing them spell out that doubling my rent was the fair solution made it undeniable. I knew there was no way I could justify staying. The numbers didn't add up, financially or emotionally. Paying that much rent, above market, for the privilege of supporting someone else's inertia wasn't sustainable. It didn't make sense on paper, and it didn't make sense in principle. And that's when the decision started to settle in. I realized this wasn't just about 1 month's bill, or even the next. This was a line in the sand about what my role in the family was supposed to be. They viewed me as the dependable one who could be squeezed for more, and him as the fragile one who needed shelter from real accountability. Left unchecked, that pattern wasn't going to stop here. Rent doubling today meant another demand tomorrow, and maybe another one after that, all justified by the same warped version of fairness. I didn't argue further in that moment because there was nothing left to say. I understood their position, and they had made it clear they weren't budging. My only option was to accept or walk away. For them, doubling their responsible child's rent was common sense. For me, it was the breaking point, and that breaking point made me realize something important. Every conversation eventually reaches a moment where their justifications run out, and your choice becomes painfully clear. This was mine.